Chapter 1. The evening before the handover.
Quality is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, intelligent direction, and skillful execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. William A. Foster.
The old founder did not call it retirement. He disliked the word. Retirement, he once told his son, sounds as if life has dismissed you from duty. I am not retiring. I am merely changing my chair. He was 82 now. His hair had turned the color of the winter mist that rested each morning on the hills beyond the hotel. His walk had slowed, but his eyes had not. They still carried that rare brightness found in people who had wrestled with life without becoming bitter, who had lost money without losing dignity, who had built something not merely to own it, but to leave it behind in better hands. The hotel stood on the gentle rise of a hill road, neither grand nor ordinary. It had only 18 rooms, a garden restaurant, a small library, a stone courtyard, a kitchen known for its quiet excellence, and a view that made tired people remember that they were still alive. Guests did not come there for luxury alone. They came for silence, for clean food, for respectful service, for conversations under old trees, for the feeling that someone had thought about their comfort before they arrived. The founder, Mr. Visveshwar Ganguly, had built it over 35 years. He had begun with 6 rooms, 1 cook, 2 attendants, a second-hand generator, and a dream that people deserved hospitality without noise. Over time, the hotel became known not by advertisements but by memory. Guests returned with their children. Young couples returned as parents. Retired officers came every winter. Writers hid there. Corporate teams came for retreats and left strangely softened. But that evening was different. The sun had lowered behind the hills, and the hotel lights had begun to glow one by one. The founder sat in the old conference room, the same room where he had once interviewed his first chef, negotiated with bankers, scolded contractors, comforted employees, and signed the papers that nearly ruined him during the difficult years. Across the table sat his son, Akshay, recently appointed Chief Executive Officer. Akshay was 42, educated, sincere, energetic, and slightly impatient in the way capable people often are when they inherit something they did not build from the ground. He loved the hotel, but he saw it as a platform. He wanted expansion, brand visibility, digital booking strength, sustainability awards, perhaps a second property near the coast. He spoke the language of scale. His father spoke the language of roots. Beside them sat the quality mentor. He was not an employee of the hotel, although everyone treated him with the affection given to someone who had become part of the family's thinking. He had been invited many years earlier to help the hotel prepare for a quality certification. He had stayed long enough to become something else entirely. He was now a mirror, a challenger, a guide, sometimes a gentle disturbance in comfortable rooms. People called him the quality mentor, though he always smiled at the title. Quality, he would say, is too small a word when people use it only for inspection. Quality is the character of a promise. That evening, Visveshwar had requested his presence. "I want you to speak to Akshay," the old founder said, "not as a consultant, as a witness." The mentor looked at him carefully. "A witness to what?" "To what business really is," Visveshwar replied. "Before I hand him the keys." Akshay laughed softly. "Father, you have already handed me the keys. The board has approved it. The bank knows it. The staff knows it. Even the website says I am the CEO now." Visveshwar looked at his son with tenderness. "The website may know you are CEO, but I want to know whether the hotel knows." The room became quiet. Outside, a waiter crossed the courtyard carrying tea to a guest. Somewhere in the kitchen, steel touched steel. The evening birds began their final argument before night. The mentor leaned back in his chair. He had heard many handover speeches in his life. Most were about assets, shares, authority, property, customers, cash, loans, and legal papers. Very few were about responsibility. Fewer still were about continuity. He turned to Akshay. "Tell me," he said, "what exactly are you inheriting?" Akshay was ready. A profitable boutique hotel with strong customer loyalty, a respected brand in the region, good occupancy, trained staff, established suppliers, a growing online presence, and considerable potential for expansion. The mentor nodded. That is the language of a good presentation. Now tell me again, but this time do not speak as a CEO presenting to investors. Speak as a custodian speaking to tomorrow. Akshay smiled, but the smile weakened slightly. I am inheriting my father's life's work. Better, said the mentor, but still not enough. Visveshwar watched silently. The mentor continued. You are inheriting the trust of guests who sleep here without fear. You are inheriting the livelihood of families who depend on salaries from this place. You are inheriting food that must not harm anyone. You are inheriting gas lines, electrical panels, water tanks, fire exits, digital booking systems, supplier promises, waste, energy bills, insurance conditions, bank expectations, legal permissions, online reviews, community goodwill, and the invisible reputation your father has built in the minds of people who may never read your balance sheet. Akshay's expression changed. The mentor leaned forward. You are not inheriting a hotel. You are inheriting a living system. No one spoke for a moment. The old founder closed his eyes as if the sentence had touched something deep inside him. The mentor continued, his voice calm but firm. A business is never just a business. It is a promise under pressure. Every day something tests that promise. A guest arrives tired and expects warmth. A child eats from your kitchen and expects safety. An employee climbs a ladder and expects to return home alive. A supplier delivers ingredients and expects payment. A regulator expects compliance. A community expects you not to poison its water, burn its air, or misuse its trust. A bank expects repayment. A customer expects truth in your advertisement. Your people expect leadership when something goes wrong. Akshay looked toward the window. And ISO helps with this? He asked. The mentor smiled. ISO can help, but only if you understand what it is really for. Standards are not the soul of business. They are disciplined reminders of what responsible leadership should never forget. Visveshwar opened his eyes. That is why I ask you to come. The mentor looked at the founder. You built much of this by instinct. You knew guests by name. You smelled trouble before reports arrived. You walked through the kitchen before breakfast. You checked the generator before storms. You knew which employee was worried, which supplier was unreliable, which wall had moisture, which guest complaint mattered, which expense was becoming waste. You had a founder's intimacy with the business. He then turned to Akshay. But a second-generation leader cannot rely only on the founder's instinct. Instinct must become system. Wisdom must become process. Memory must become documented knowledge. Concern must become control. Values must become habits that survive the founder. Akshay looked at his father. So you are saying the danger is not that I do not care. The danger is that what father carried in himself may not automatically transfer to the organization. Exactly, said the mentor. That is why many good businesses weaken after succession. The founder was the system. When he steps back, the system discovers how much it depended on his eyes, his ears, his fear, his discipline, and his conscience. The sentence landed heavily. Visveshwar smiled, not with pride, but with acceptance. I have made that mistake, he said. I kept too much in my head. The mentor shook his head gently. You kept it alive. Now it must be made transferable. Akshay sat straighter. Then where do we begin? The mentor looked around the room, as if asking permission from the walls that had heard so much history. We begin with purpose. Akshay expected words like strategy, certification, process mapping, or risk assessment. Instead, the mentor asked a slower question. Why should this hotel continue? The CEO looked surprised. Because it is profitable. That is why investors may want it to continue, said the mentor. Not why it deserves to continue. Akshay was silent. Visveshwar looked at his son with interest. This was the question he himself had never formally answered, though he had lived it for decades. The mentor waited. Finally, Akshay said, "It should continue because it gives people meaningful hospitality. It gives guests peace. It gives employees dignity. It supports the local community. It can show that a hotel can be profitable without becoming careless, noisy, or soulless." The mentor's face softened. Now we have a beginning. He stood up and walked toward the whiteboard. His handwriting was slow, deliberate, almost old-fashioned. He wrote, "A business exists to fulfill its purpose continuously, responsibly, and profitably." Then he turned back to Akshay. "This is the sentence you must protect. Not just profit, not just responsibility, not just continuity. All three. Profit without responsibility becomes exploitation. Responsibility without profit becomes unsustainable sentiment. Continuity without purpose becomes mechanical survival. A great business must hold all three together." Akshay read the sentence several times. Visveshwar whispered, "Continuously, responsibly, and profitably." The mentor nodded. "Yes, that is where the ISO way begins. Quality protects your promise. Safety protects your people. Food safety protects your guests. Environment protects your social license. Energy protects your resources and cost discipline. Information security protects your digital trust. Finance protects your ability to act. Business continuity holds the organization together when disruption arrives." Akshay asked, "And where does leadership fit?" The mentor looked at him directly. "Leadership is the force that refuses to treat these as separate subjects." The answer stayed in the room. For years, Akshay had seen departments. Quality was the concern of the quality manager. Safety belonged to the maintenance and HSE team. Food safety belonged to the chef. Finance belonged to accounts. Marketing belonged to the digital team. IT belonged to the young man who knew passwords and servers. Environment belonged to whoever handled waste collection and government forms. Business continuity, if he was honest, belonged nowhere in particular. The mentor seemed to read his thoughts. "Most organizations are not destroyed by one big weakness," he said. "They are weakened by separation. One department knows the customer is unhappy. Another knows the supplier is unreliable. Another knows maintenance is delayed. Another knows the fire drill was poor. Another knows cash flow is tight. Another knows the backup system has not been tested. But no one brings the whole truth to one table." He tapped the board gently. "An integrated management system is that table." Akshay leaned forward. "So the system is not a file?" "No," said the mentor. "The system is how truth travels through the organization before trouble becomes tragedy." Visveshwar smiled. "That sentence is worth keeping." The mentor continued. "Let us take this hotel. Suppose your kitchen cold room fails at midnight. At first, it looks like a maintenance issue, but within hours, it becomes a food safety issue. If food is spoiled, it becomes a customer safety issue. If guests are served unsafe food, it becomes a legal and reputation issue. If breakfast cannot be served, it becomes an operations issue. If the incident appears online, it becomes a marketing issue. If many bookings are canceled, it becomes a financial issue. If the supplier cannot replace stock quickly, it becomes a supply chain issue. If you do not communicate properly, it becomes a trust issue. If this happens during peak season, it becomes a business continuity issue." Akshay nodded slowly. "One failure, many consequences. One weak signal, many possible wounds," said the mentor. "That is why managers must learn to see systems, not fragments." The founder looked at his son. "When I was younger, I used to check the cold room myself before sleeping." Akshay smiled. "I know, father, everyone knows." The old man looked down at his hands. "They laughed at me sometimes." "They respected you," said the mentor. Because you understood something before it had a name and a standard. You understood that care is a control. The room became still again. That was the mentor's gift. He could take a simple act and reveal the philosophy inside it. Akshay asked, "But how do I lead this without becoming trapped in small details? I cannot personally check every cold room, fire extinguisher, supplier bill, guest complaint, and server backup." "You should not," said the mentor. "A founder survives by personal vigilance. A leader of continuity survives by designing organizational vigilance." "What does that mean?" "It means the business must learn to see, think, respond, and improve even when you are not present." The mentor walked back to the table. "Let us begin with the questions every leader must ask. Not hundreds of questions, 5. For every discipline, 5 questions. Quality, safety, environment, food safety, energy, finance, information security, and continuity. But the questions must not be asked like an auditor ticking boxes. They must be asked like a leader protecting the future." Akshay took out his notebook. The mentor watched him and smiled. "Good, but do not write too quickly. First, listen." He looked at the CEO, then at the founder. "In quality, ask this. What are the 5 failures that can break the customer's trust badly enough to threaten the business? A dirty room may irritate a guest. A false promise may anger a guest. But contaminated food, unsafe water, a failed reservation during a wedding, or repeated service arrogance can damage the brand deeply. Not all quality failures are equal. Leadership must know which failures can become continuity threats." Akshay wrote slowly. The mentor continued. "In safety, ask what can kill, burn, trap, poison, or seriously injure people. Do not begin with statistics. Begin with conscience. In a hotel, fire is not an abstract hazard. Electrical overload, kitchen gas, blocked exits, poor evacuation of elderly guests, untrained night staff, smoke movement through corridors. These are not safety department topics. These are boardroom topics." Visveshwar nodded. His face had become serious. The mentor turned slightly toward him. "You know this." The founder's voice was low. "I have feared fire all my life." "Good," said the mentor. "Some fears are intelligent. Leadership must not remove them. It must organize them." Then he looked back to Akshay. "In environment, ask what you take from nature, what you return to nature, and what damage can return to you as cost, complaint, penalty, or shame. Water misuse, untreated wastewater, poor waste segregation, diesel leakage, chemical cleaning, noise, plastic, food waste, landscape damage, all of these speak. A hotel in a beautiful place must never become the enemy of the beauty that feeds it." Akshay stopped writing for a moment. That sentence touched something in him. He had always used the landscape in marketing photographs. He had not often thought of the landscape as a stakeholder. The mentor went on. "In energy, ask where profit leaks silently. Electricity, diesel, gas, refrigeration, heating, cooling, laundry, kitchen equipment, pumps, lighting. Energy waste is not dramatic. It does not shout like an accident. It bleeds quietly through the month and appears later as reduced margin. In the age of climate responsibility, energy is not merely a bill. It is a measure of discipline." The CFO, who had joined quietly at the back of the room, cleared his throat. "That is true. Energy cost has increased sharply." The mentor looked at him. "Then it is not only your problem. It is an operations problem, an engineering problem, an environmental problem, a guest behavior problem, a procurement problem, and a leadership problem." The CFO smiled reluctantly. "That makes it everyone's problem." "No," said the mentor. "It makes it everyone's responsibility." He then continued. "In finance, ask what can make the business unable to act. Poor estimation, wrong pricing, weak budgeting, delayed receivables, excessive borrowing, expansion without cash discipline, hidden cost of poor quality, hidden cost of accidents, hidden cost of energy waste, hidden cost of employee turnover. Many companies do not die because they had no customers. They die because they had no cash when reality demanded payment. Akshay looked at the CFO. The CFO looked back and nodded. The mentor's voice became softer. In information security, ask what happens if your booking system stops, your guest data leaks, your payment system fails, your ERP becomes unavailable, or your reputation is attacked online. A modern hotel is not only beds and food, it is data, trust, and digital continuity. Akshay said, "We are too small for serious cyber risk." The mentor did not smile. That is what many small organizations say just before discovering that criminals do not respect size. They respect weakness. The words were not harsh, but they were final. Then the mentor paused. And finally, business continuity. Ask what must continue whatever happens. Not everything is equally critical. During a crisis, leadership must know what to protect first. Guest life, employee safety, communication, critical records, food safety, power, water, security, essential service, cash, reputation, recovery. Continuity is the art of knowing what must not fail, what may pause, and what must be restored first. The room had changed. It no longer felt like a succession meeting. It felt like an initiation. Vishveshwar watched his son carefully. He saw the ambitions still there, but now it had acquired weight. That pleased him. Ambition without weight is dangerous. It runs fast because it has not yet understood what it carries. Akshay closed his notebook. "So this is what you mean by the ISO way?" The mentor nodded. The ISO way, at its best, is the discipline of asking responsible questions before life asks them brutally. The founder looked out toward the courtyard. A family had just arrived. The child was pointing at the lights in the garden. The receptionist smiled and folded her hands in welcome. A bellboy lifted the luggage. The scene was ordinary and therefore sacred. Vishveshwar spoke quietly. "When I opened this hotel, I wanted people to feel safe here. Not impressed, safe. I wanted them to feel that someone had thought of them. I did not know ISO then. I did not know management systems. I only knew that if a guest trusted us for one night, we had no right to be careless." The mentor looked at Akshay. "That is your inheritance." Akshay's eyes softened. For the first time that evening, he did not feel like a new CEO. He felt like a trustee. The mentor stood. "Tomorrow we will speak of quality, not inspection, not forms, not certificates. We will speak of the customer promise and the ways in which organizations betray it without intending to. Then we will speak of safety, environment, energy, food, data, finance, and continuity. But remember this before all else." He pointed once more to the sentence on the board. "A business exists to fulfill its purpose continuously, responsibly, and profitably." "Protect that sentence," he said, "and the standards will make sense. Forget that sentence, and even the best certificates will become decoration." The old founder slowly rose from his chair. Akshay immediately moved to help him, but Vishveshwar waved him away with a gentle smile. "I can still stand for this," he said. He walked to the board, placed his hand beneath the sentence, and looked at his son. "I built the hotel," he said. "You must now build the system that allows it to outlive me." Akshay did not answer quickly. Some replies are too small for important moments. After a while, he said, "I understand." The mentor looked at him. "No," he said kindly. "Tonight you have heard. Understanding will come when you begin to lead differently." Outside, the night settled over the hotel. The kitchen prepared dinner. The generator hummed softly during its routine test. A housekeeping supervisor checked the corridor. A guest opened a window and breathed in the hill air. Somewhere in the office, the booking system confirmed another reservation. The business was alive. And for the first time, the new CEO began to see that keeping it alive was not an administrative duty. It was a leadership mission.